Merlin's Magic World. Merlin Meets the Man in the Moon. This book is dedicated to all the children who see the world through the lens of autism. Merlin and Daddy were out by the campfire looking up at the night sky. "Look, Daddy," Merlin said, pointing. "I see the moon." There in the sky was a big full moon. "Would you like to see it even better?" Daddy asked. "Oh, yes," Merlin replied, jumping up and down and clapping excitedly. "Wait right here," Daddy told him. Merlin looked wonderingly up at all the beautiful stars and waited patiently for Daddy. In a few minutes, Daddy came out carrying a strange tube of flags. He stopped way back from the fire and Merlin hurried over to him. "What's that?" he asked. "It's a telescope," Daddy replied. "It helps you see things that are very far away." He opened the legs and carefully set everything up. Stepping back, he motioned to Merlin. "Go ahead and look through," he said. "Just be careful not to kick it." Merlin stepped up and put his eyes to the telescope and gasped in surprise. He could see the moon so well. Daddy patted him fondly on the shoulder and walked back to the fire. Merlin looked carefully through the telescope at the surface of the moon. In just a moment, he saw something move. He stared carefully at the spot for what seemed like a long time. Suddenly, he saw a little man. It must be the man in the moon he'd heard Daddy talk about. The little man waved and then motioned to Merlin to come closer. Oh, how Merlin wished there was some way he could talk to the man in the moon. Then Merlin felt a strange tug, and there he was! Standing in front of him was the little man, smiling happily. Merlin laughed and clapped his hands in excitement. "Would you like to play with me?" asked the man in the moon. "Oh, yes, I would," Merlin answered. So Merlin played with the man in the moon. They slid down the sides of the moon craters. They skipped stones across the seas of dust. They jumped very high into the air. Finally, Merlin was starting to get tired. The man in the moon smiled. "Would you like to rest a while?" He asked. Merlin nodded in agreement. So the man in the moon took Merlin to his house. They enjoyed hot chocolate and cookies together as they relaxed in chairs by the fire. When their cocoa was finished, the man in the moon took Merlin to another room. There in the middle of the floor was a telescope just like Daddy. The man in the moon invited Merlin to look through it, and Merlin happily did. First, he showed Merlin the Big Dipper, or Ursa Major. He explained that the Big Dipper was just part of a bigger constellation of a bear. In fact, Ursa Major has Big Bear. All of a sudden, Merlin could see the bear. He laughed and clapped happily. Then they looked at many other constellations. The man in the moon explained that only some of the many constellations could be seen right now, but he showed them all to Merlin one at a time. The man in the moon explained that constellations were groups of stars that helped make a picture. He also explained that there were many pictures in the night sky. Suddenly, Merlin yawned. The man in the moon smiled sadly. I guess you need to go to bed, he said. He turned the telescope toward her. Will you come back soon and play with me again sometime? Yes, I will, Merlin promised. Look through the telescope, the man in the moon said. Merlin leaned down, and there was his house. Near the house was his daddy by the fire, looking up into the sky. Then with another little tug, he was standing next to Daddy by the fire. Daddy looked down and asked, "Did you like looking at the moon?" Merlin leaned against Daddy and hugged him tightly. "Yes, Daddy, it was so much fun. Can I do it again sometime?" "Of course," Daddy replied. "Anytime the sky is clear at night, we can look through the telescope and see the moon and stars." As they walked back to the house, Merlin thought of all the other things he might see through the telescope. Think of all the adventures he could have. Daddy tucked him into bed and wished him good night. Merlin slipped out of bed and peeked through the window at the moon shining in the night sky. He smiled and waved to the man in the moon, and then went back to bed thinking of the next time they could play together. The